I mean, come on, come on. And he did it up until he made the deal, right? Until he got out, he was quite critical of President Trump. But you know, he can have a come to Jesus moment and decide the mainstream media made him think that. But we all know that by the way, he's very educated. That was an astonishing number of words that were well put together. So I don't know.
I mean, up until basically the summer, he decided that Trump was going to give him what he wanted, which was the power over the food conversation, power over the health conversation. In return, Trump made him eat McDonald's on an airplane, which is kind of par for the course for Trump.
Well, it's the humiliation ritual.
Right. I think that this is the question. It's like, what does it take to get back into Trump's good graces? And I think a meal is perhaps one of the things, if you ask Mitt Romney.
Historically, it's always the breaking of bread, right? That's how we come together around the
Is that
table.
bread?
We'll use air quotes. It's bread or
Right.
bread-like products,
Right,
you know.
yeah.
But I mean, listen, this is something we've seen happen many times. You know, President Trump seems to have this gift for turning adversaries into allies. Marco Rubio is going to be Secretary of State. He said some very negative things about President Trump when he was running, you know, for president. You see, Elon Musk was critical of him. Now he's going to be his biggest ally. Is going to be leading up Doge. So there seems to be very much a pattern with President Trump. People have a caricature in their mind, but then they see him govern or they get to know him personally, and he's very persuasive.
Or
Or
he has
the
something-
opposite.
Or he has something that they want.
Yes.
But
This
there's
is
also
politics,
the
so we're
opposite
not
when they
playing
leave,
Pollyanna.
right?
Doesn't
There's
come-
two parts.
The reversing of looking at someone like someone that he hated and then being somebody that he likes or at least he welcomes into the camp doesn't come without a cost, because you talk about the humiliation. He makes them bend the knee. He makes them, you know, jump through hoops. He makes them come to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring, right? It's not a pretty sight when it happens, when that person decides to put their political future or their own interest before, right, what their character is, where they stood before, which is probably how they really feel. They focus on, I need to be transactional. If I want a future in this party, if I want a future in politics, if I want to be a cabinet secretary, if I want to have control over my issues, I need to go and bend the knee. And they don't care about that.
To me, these are the things that the American people should pay attention to. So first of all, to get back in Trump's good graces, it's easy. He just makes you do the thing you said you wouldn't do. So the thing that you said you wouldn't do, the thing that you said was absolutely true about him, that one scathing indictment that you made, you walk it back or you do the thing that you said you wouldn't do. But to me, paying attention to people who tell us about morals, values, God, country, what they do when the rubber meets the road, when there's something in it for them, that is what you pay attention to when you're choosing your leaders. You can pay attention to votes, you can pay attention to policy, all of that stuff matters. But when you're choosing a leader, what you should pay attention to is what someone does when there's a carrot being dangled in front of them. And these people fail this test. They fail this test because when they think that they can beat them, they want to beat them. But when they know that they can't, they join them.
But
So
Nikki
this
Haley
is a-
came back into
sorry.
the fold. I'm curious about your thoughts on this.
So-
Nikki Haley came back into the fold, but Trump didn't forgive her.
Well, and I agree but the question, I keep thinking about this, so you're questioning the character of all of these people, that they didn't genuinely change their minds when they got to know Donald Trump. This was because a carrot was dangled in front of them.
So what I'm saying is,
And I'm not trying to ignore your question.
No. It's one thing to go from, hey, this guy is not qualified to lead. This guy is too boisterous or rude. That's one thing. But to go from Hitler
Yeah.
to me and him
It's a
are
long
cool,
road.
that is a gigantic leap. I thought you were Hitler, but now we can eat dinner.
Didn't Vice President Harris call President Biden a racist to his face on the debate stage?
She absolutely did.
So isn't she guilty of doing the same thing?
Even whether she is or whether she's not, she very well may be. Whether she is or whether she did it or she didn't do it.
So then why didn't it disqualify her from being a candidate for president? In your
Look, so what I don't want to do here, though, is get too into the tit for tat, both sides do it. Look, I'll tell you right now, I'm not
not
Democrat. I'm not Democrat. Let's say that all the Democrats are messed up, too. When I said choosing a leader, I didn't say choosing a Republican leader or choosing a Democratic leader. When someone has the opportunity to further their career and they go back on things that they said that were fundamental. I'm talking about threat to democracy. I'm talking about Hitler. I'm talking about nationalism. I'm talking using words that are that charged. And then you're doing
RFK
about
Jr.
things.
doesn't need the government. Neither does Elon Musk. He's a multi-billionaire. They don't need a government position.
The
They
one
don't
thing
need a
I'll say,
cabinet
hang on a second. The
I'm
one
gonna
thing I'll
stop you
say
there.
about RFK Jr. is that he was very clear about this when, right before the election, he told his supporters, you need to not vote for me and vote for Donald Trump because this is the only way that we will get what we want, which is control over the health agencies. He was the sort
what
of
he
quid
wanted.
pro quo, so to speak, was pretty transparent. He said it. So he clearly told his supporters, we're getting something out of this. Vote for Trump.
It couldn't be more transactional.
But that's what
than
every
that.
campaign about.
I know. We're just saying
No, but
politics.
I don't
Trump
think
is the
there's
distillation
absolutely-
of politics.
But it's
in a
but
human
saying
form.
that Donald Trump is just this corrupt human being and that everybody else he associates with, he corrupts them and they compromise every moral that they have in order to be on his side, I just think is an unfair
We didn't
characterization.
say
of all these
everyone. We're
people.
saying in this case,
But you said Elon Musk, RFK
Elon Musk
Jr.
has shifted his personality. I know him. I've interviewed him more times than anyone, I think, for many, many years, for 30 years. I never knew what his politics were until he was sort of an Obama person. He was sort of this. That shift was significant, but it was much more complex. It had to do with COVID. It had to do with his child. It had to do with a lot of things. This RFK one feels very transactional, and I think Abby's right. It is a very long road from Hitler to I didn't mean Hitler. It's you don't have to do that. Same thing with J.D. Vance.
Same thing
I've
with
been
J.D.
at
Vance,
events
that's
when J.D. Vance didn't like Trump. He really didn't like him, so much so that I was at something where he was so anti-Trump that I was like, hey, there are some good things about this guy. And if I'm the one saying it, I was sort of surprised by the vehemence. And so the vehemence that was then shifted into utter support. It is suspect, and you should suspect.
I just think it's unfair. It's unfair to
What's
question
everyone's
because
unfair?
questioning their character, that they're giving up all of their character in order to get a position in somebody's cabinet. I just think it's an unfair
You think that,
characterization.
just to be clear, you think that people are just having a
road
profound
to
change
Damascus.
of heart.
I think that when
All of
looking
these
at
people.
I think
There's
Do you
nothing
think none of them
transactional about it.
are
no,
being
I'm not saying
transactional?
there's nothing transactional about it. I'm saying that when they're looking at the options that they had for the presidency, they chose this path thinking it was a better path. I don't think
Because
it
they
was.
were getting something better out of it.
I'd agree with you that some of the voters did that. Not to cut your wisdom, but I think that some of the voters did that. But when we're talking about these people, we're talking about going from being the other end of the spectrum to being lapdogs. And I'm not, I don't want to get into a hole, but lapdog.
You think Elon Musk is a lapdog?
My G.
Yeah.
Okay, like,
We just agree to disagree.